Hello everyone, I'm Bruffy1322 and welcome to another GTA discussion video where I'm going to be having a bit more of analysis over the Executives and Other Criminals DLC update that we've had recently. These are pretty standard for my channel, you know, an update will come out, I'll put out the regular sort of testing video or videos now that I'm doing top speed as well, and then I always come up with a sort of long rambling discussion video like this where I'm going to go sort of in a lot more depth about the features from the DLC. This time, because the DLC is so huge really and there's so much stuff in there, I am going to split it up into two parts. These are known as quite long rambling videos, so if you don't like that style of video then fair enough, but I am going to split it up into two parts just to make it a little bit more manageable. This first part is going to be solely based on the cars, the vehicles in the DLC, and then the next part, part 2, will be about the extra features like the yacht and the houses and the apartments and all that kind of stuff. So, talking about the cars, I think the first thing that we need to address and we need to talk about is the class issues with the Schafter. Now, in the game code, the Schafters are named Schafter 3, Schafter 4, Schafter 5 and Schafter 6. So clearly it's been a simple miscommunication somewhere along the lines that the V12 Schafter, the armoured V12 Schafter, has gone in the sedans class instead of the LWB version. You know, they've just made a simple error there, which is probably quite easy to do, but the people who program these cars and know what these cars are doing are never ever going to be putting the V12 armoured Schafter in the sedans class. It is 4 seconds per lap quicker than the next best sedan. It is more than 10 miles per hour quicker in terms of top speed than the next best sedan, which would have been the Cognoscenti 5.5. So we would have had a new quickest sedan in terms of top speed anyway. But yeah, they would never do that because they're not stupid. They program these cars, they know how they act and what kind of speeds they're going to get, and they've done a really good job in the past in terms of balance, especially when it comes to the top supercars. So Rockstar is such a huge company, you know, what they probably did is sent it off to some intern or apprentice or something like that who doesn't have a clue what he's doing, said put the two V12 Shafters in the sports class for us and put the LWB Shafters in the sedans class, and he's just for some reason assumed that the two armoured versions would be slower and the two armoured versions needed to go in the sedans class, and that's obviously wrong. So, you know, it could have even been as simple as all of the Shafters were in the sedans class to start with, and then they did some testing and realised that wait a second, we can't put those V12s in the sedans class, and at the last minute decided to put the V12s in the sports class and ended up making a mistake by putting the wrong cars in the sports class instead. Because funnily enough, when you actually go into a race in the lobby screen, all of the Shafters are available in their stock form in sedan races. So that's something that they've got wrong as well. Really, the two V12 versions, even in their stock form in the lobby screen before a race, they should be in the sports class as well. So basically they've completely messed up the classes with the Schafter. It's not the first time that we've seen this. Obviously we've seen the Blister Compact before, we've seen the Moonbeam is more recent, and when you end up seeing because I've already done the testing for this, when you end up seeing the top speeds of the vans, when I bring out that video, you'll see that the Moonbeam is an even worse decision to put it in the muscles class rather than the vans class than what we already thought. It's basically the Blister Compact all over again. So yeah, hopefully this gets fixed, but basically what I'm going to do is, that's going to be the end of what I'm talking about it for now. I'm going to let everything settle a little bit over the Christmas period. We are getting a new DLC coming very shortly as well. It came as part of this DLC, but we're getting a new car at Christmas time. I've already seen the stats for that, so it's in the game code already. It's just based on when they decide to release it. Very similar to what they did with the Halloween DLC vehicles. So I'm going to, I'll be testing all that and doing all that stuff. I'm going to do all that, let that settle down a little bit, let all the excitement settle down, and then what I'm going to do is make a big push to sort out these classes. Nothing major. but I'll obviously explain about it more at the time. But look out for that video, because I'm going to go really hard on it, like I've done in the past, especially when we tried to get the turbo fixed. You know, Rockstar support forum posts a full-on explanation of why the classes should be changed. It'll include the Shafters, the Blister Compact, the Moonbeam, and then some other small suggestions that would help but aren't necessarily major. So look out for that, but that is going to be for sort of in a few weeks time when everything's settled down. I'll then make a specific video specifically for these reclassifications of cars, because I don't think Rockstar are probably going to do it on their own unless we start to sort of let them know our discontent about this. So that's all I'm going to say about that. For the rest of this video, I'll probably just assume that the LWB versions of the Schafter are in the sedans class and the V12 versions are in the sports class, because it just makes so much more sense doing it that way. Now in general for this DLC, I would say that for me personally it feels a little bit lazy in terms of the cars. Now the reason that I say that is because there's essentially 4 cars for the price of 1. You've got, taking the ballers as an example, you've got the regular baller, then you've got the armoured version of the regular baller. This is the baller LE. Then you've got the long wheelbase version, a normal version, and then you've got the long wheelbase version but an armoured version. So basically it's exactly the same car but in 4 different ways. Now the only difference, and I see a lot of people seem to be unsure about what the differences were between the LWB version and the normal version of these cars, and obviously we've got the Cognoscenti, the Schafter and the baller all have these 4 different variations. Basically LWB, it stands for long wheelbase, and that all that means is that the distance between the wheels is longer, so the car itself is longer, and that's it. That is the only difference. You can't fit any more passengers in one of the longer wheelbase versions. They are a little bit heavier, which means that they will be a little bit better in terms of collisions with other cars, and they are a little bit slower as well. So all of in the testing that we've done in terms of top speed and in terms of around the track, all of the long wheelbase versions of cars have turned out to be slower than the regular versions of cars. Now this isn't something that we haven't seen before. The Sand King is the perfect example. You've got the Sand King XL, which can fit 4 people in it, and then you've got the Sand King SWB. SWB stands for short wheelbase. That can only fit 2 people in. So basically the Sand King and the Sand King XL and the Sand King SWB are exactly the same. It's just the Sand King XL is a little bit longer. However, it does have a functional purpose, because you can actually fit 2 more people in it. You can fit 3 passengers and yourself as a driver in the XL version. The SWB version is only for 2 people. That isn't the case with all of these cars. You've basically got cars that are slightly longer, and I'll try to show a few pictures on the screen as well to show you exactly what I mean. Basically, if you just focus on the rear end of these cars, they just get a little bit longer. They're just extended a little bit, and that's it. That's the only difference. There's no functional purpose to it at all. So it feels a little bit lazy in that respect when it comes to these 3 cars that have different variations. Like, you know, what is the point in that? What is the point? I just can't get my head around why they would introduce these long wheelbase versions. And the same is true for the Cognoscenti as well. Although there isn't a specific LWB version of the Cognoscenti, basically the Cognoscenti 5.5 is the short wheelbase version of the regular Cognoscenti. So they've got around it just by naming it a little bit differently. It's exactly the same. If you compare the Cognoscenti 5.5 and the regular Cognoscenti, the regular Cognoscenti is basically just a little bit longer, but again, no functional purpose. Whether they have ideas for what they're going to do with that in the future and it is going to serve some sort of purpose, I don't know. But at the moment, it's just a car that's a little bit longer and a little bit slower, and ultimately it has exactly the same body style. So for me, I just question what was the point in doing this. You know, basically if you imagine that the LWB version of the Schafter, both of them are in the sedans class like they should be, then the regular LWB version of the Schafter is exactly the same pace as the regular Schafter in the sedans class, and they would still remain at the top of the sedans class in terms of race performance. For me, I can't understand why, if you're making a V12 version of the Schafter already that's going to be in the sports class, why not, instead of creating another 2 Shafters, give us a long wheelbase version of, say, the Tailgater, and improve its performance a little bit so it's on the pace of the regular Schafter in the sedans class, then you've actually got a choice of cars to use. You could either use the regular Schafter or the long wheelbase version of the Tailgater, because as we know, the regular Tailgater isn't quite on the pace as the regular Schafter in the sedans class. Now, yes, we do have two different options in terms of what sedan to use if the LWB version was in the sedans class like it should be, but they are pretty much exactly the same car. It's just that the Schafter LWB is a little bit of a longer version than the Schafter. And it's the same with the ballers, you know. Why not create a armoured version of the Rakoto, for example, or a longer version of the Rakoto, and make it a little bit quicker like they've done with the Baller LE so that it's on the pace. I quite like the idea that we've got a Baller LE in general, because it means that there is something that can take it to the Huntley S, at least to a certain extent anyway. And certainly off-road. The ballers are very, very good off-road, but yeah, it just feels frustrating in terms of those cars that we've got basically the same car repeated 4 different times, and they could have very easily just made it a different car, a Tailgater body instead, and a Rakoto body instead of the 2 extra ballers. The long wheelbase versions of these cars just, to me, make absolutely no sense. Apart from the Cognoscenti, obviously it is very nice to have the regular Cognoscenti back, but then you've just got the smaller Cognoscenti 5.5, which is just the same body but a bit shorter. So you could have done that there's plenty of sedans out there where we could have had a different variation. If you're going to be reusing different cars, the same cars that we've seen before, like the Baller and like the Schafter, at least don't repeat them 4 different times across armoured and long wheelbase versions. There's plenty of cars out there that they could have chosen instead. So that's my sort of mini rant over with in terms of the problems with this DLC. The reclassification video will be coming up in a few weeks. Definitely keep an eye out for that, because I will be asking for your support and upvoting all of these different things to make sure these classes are sorted out, especially when it comes to the Shafters. And yeah, just a bit of a shame that they've decided to repeat the cars 4 different times. That's the only thing that I've really got a problem with when it comes to this DLC. But anyway, it's time to do what I usually do now and go through all of the cars sort of one by one, but really it's sort of 4 by 4 initially, and talk about them in more detail and analyse them a little bit more. So I'll start with the ballers. The ballers are very, very good off-road. As I mentioned, it's great that we now have some quicker ballers. You know, the Baller LE is slightly quicker than the regular baller, which means that it is closer to the Huntley S. It's still, obviously, it doesn't have the traction of the baller of the Huntley S. So on a regular race, the Huntley S is still going to be the dominant force in the SUVs class, but at least there's something there that's a little bit closer to it. The ballers are better off-road as well than what the Huntley S will be, and as we saw from the top speed testing, it does have the regular Baller LE version, none of the armoured versions or the long wheelbase versions, but the regular bog standard version is now the quickest in terms of top speed by 0.5 of a mile per hour over the Huntley S and over all of the other ballers as well. So that's good, you know, that we do have a little bit more balance at the top of the SUVs class now, and that's great. It's just a shame that we've got 3 other ballers that are pretty much useless in terms of racing as well, when we could have had even more of a variety of cars, but I've talked about that too much now. So that's for the ballers. The Cognoscentis, it is nice to see the Cognoscenti back. It really is. I always used to like the original Cognoscenti from GTA 4, and I thought it was a shame that all we had in GTA 5 was the Cognoscenti Cabrio. I always used to like the longer version of the Cognoscenti, so it's really great to see that back. Again, the Cognoscenti 5.5 is the quicker version. It's the short wheelbase version, and it is quicker. And if the Shafters had have been in the right class, the Cognoscenti 5.5 would have been the new king of the sedans class in terms of top speed, and both of the Cognoscenti 5.5s, the regular version and the armoured version, are quicker than the Super Diamond, which used to be the king in terms of top speed for the sedans class. So it was interesting there that we've got 2 new cars that are actually quicker at the top end of the sedans class when it comes to top speed. The Cognoscenti, the regular Cognoscenti, didn't actually do that bad either. It was, you know, reasonably high up there in terms of top speed. Obviously just not quite on the pace of the shorter wheelbase version, the 5.5. But yeah, it's good to see those Cognoscentis back again. I would have liked to see the Cognoscenti 5.5 just be a little bit of a different model of car. There's plenty of sedans, but yeah, especially when it comes to the regular Cognoscenti, it's good to have that car model back. And yeah, interesting that we've got sort of brand new quickest sedans in the game, not counting the Shafters. So time to come on to the Shafters, I guess. And one thing that I will mention is with the Cognoscentis, it was nice that we can change the colour of the trim on the inside of the cars. Nice little feature there. I'd like to see sort of extra features like that added as we go through to different cars and different modifications. It would be nice to see in the future. Yeah, onto the Shafters. Now, I've never been a fan of the Schafter in general. As a car, I've never really liked the way that it drives. That's why I never really do sedan races in general, because I just don't really like it that much. The way that it looks or the way that it drives either. So to me, it seems strange that they decided to choose a Schafter of all cars in the game to make so much better. Like, I can't understand. Surely they must have other ideas of cars that they could make. I suppose, you know, it does go in with the whole executives DLC style of things and the 4-door variations of it. But to make it so much more powerful and so overpowered compared to other 4-door cars, it is in a different league completely. And certainly in terms of top speed as well, it's in a different league for the sports class on its own. And it just seems strange to me that they created that from a Schafter. Surely they could have put those sort of details and those sort of game code aspects of the car into something that was a little bit more sporty than the Schafter. But having said that, you know, I don't necessarily have a major problem with it. They've chosen to do that. But it would have been nice to see a few more sport-oriented style mods for the V12. Basically, with the V12 and the LWB versions of the Schafter, they have exactly the same visual modifications in Los Santos Customs as the regular Schafter. And for me, I feel like what distinguishes it, apart from the fact that it's quicker, obviously, there's nothing special about it that distinguishes it from a regular Schafter. Certainly with the LWB versions, which should be in the sedans class anyway, both of them, but they're pretty much exactly the same carbon copies of the regular Schafter that are a bit longer. Again, I can't understand that. And then the V12 versions, they're in the sports class, they're very, very quick, but there's nothing special about them that sets them apart from what a regular Schafter used to be in terms of visualization and car modifications. So I would have liked to see something a little bit different then, a little bit better, but we didn't get it. So yeah, it's been a very strange, these three sort of blocks of 4 cars, and the way that they've gone about it just seems very, very strange to me and very different to the way that they've done it. Having said that, the performance of the V12 version of the Schafter is such a surprise. It's absolutely unbelievable. We've never seen a car quite like this before. Basically, what the Schafter has is very high traction. Well, not the highest in the game, but it's still quite high. It's not sort of on the level of the Forza or the Elegy in the sports class or the top supercars, but it is very, very high, and it's certainly a lot high. It's certainly higher than quite a lot of the other sports cars in terms of traction, and it's also got very, very high top speed, and that top speed comes from having a low drag coefficient, basically exactly the same as what the Z-Type does. But it doesn't have a very powerful engine, contrary to the V12 moniker on it. The engine power of the Schafter, the driving force of it is actually quite low compared to all of the other sport cars and supercars. So it doesn't have the acceleration out of slow speed corners like the other sports cars do, and that's why it gets the lap time that it did in my testing. It was pretty much sort of, you know, Comet area of lap time, Serrano area of lap time, that sort of thing. Because although those cars aren't quite as quick in a straight line and they don't have the same levels of traction, they are a lot quicker in terms of getting up to speed when it comes to slow speed corners than the Schafter V12. However, there are certain situations where the Schafter V12 is one of the quickest cars in the entire game on certain tracks. Now, the prime example of this is hopefully what I'm putting, I'm actually recording this without looking at any footage or anything like that, but I intend to put this example up on the screen at this point. Basically, it's a race on my Ron Raceway variation, which is the high-speed ring, and it's essentially very, very few corners and a lot of long straights, a lot of space for the shafter to get up to its high top speed, and the corners themselves are quite quick corners. There aren't very many slow speed corners, and in a situation like that, the V12 shafter is actually pushing for world record lap times on that track, and I'm not talking about record lap times in the sports class. I'm talking about record lap times overall. It turns out that on this track, the lap record I think was set in a Turismo, and the V12 shafter basically equaled that lap time. So although it doesn't have the acceleration of some of the other sports cars, or certainly some of the supercars, in the right circumstances, on some tracks where there aren't a lot of slow speed corners, where there's a lot of long sweeping corners where that traction can be used, where there's a lot of long straights for it to get up to that top speed, it can be extremely quick, and it can certainly, especially on airport tracks and maybe some hill tracks, take it to the Feltzer, the Jester race car, and the LG as the quickest sports car in the game around a circuit. And again, you know, all tracks have different cars that suit it, but there is a very specific type of circuit that suits the Schafter V12 because it's a car that we haven't seen very much before. Not that great in terms of acceleration from slow speed corners, but very, very quick in terms of top speed, and reasonably good in terms of traction around longer speed, higher speed corners as well. So yeah, the footage that you're watching, you have seen plenty of mistakes throughout the course of this footage, because it was at the end of a stream and I was really tired at this point after testing for 2 days straight. I had plenty of mistakes from me, but what you'll see is basically how quickly it can sort of just cut through some of the regular sports cars that we thought were quick, like the Comet. It just absolutely flies past it. Elegies, it flies past it because obviously of its high top speed, and as long as you can keep that high top speed up, you're going to get a very good lap time. And the last lap of this race that you're watching is pretty much on the pace of world record lap times for this track. So I figured I'd put it in, and basically 3 of us in this race all got 1:27s, as you'll see from the lap times at the end, and that is basically world record pace, regardless of what car you're in, whether it's a supercar, sports car, or whatever. So there are certain situations where the Schafter V12 is one of the quickest cars in the game around a circuit, but it is very dependent on the circuit, and on a regular circuit where you have a mix of slow speed corners as well as high speed corners, it isn't going to be quite there in terms of the top sports cars, but it's certainly a very capable car in general, and a very different one, very strange. We haven't seen that before. So that covers the 4, let's say, disappointing variations of all of the three different cars. Now we've got 3, you could say, absolutely brand new cars at this point. I know the Cognoscenti was new as well, but that also came from GTA 4. We've got 3 completely brand new cars. Now first up is the Nightshade. I was very disappointed with the Nightshade. When I first took it out and experienced the traction that it has, I thought this could do something special. This is very nice, and that was just driving around the streets, obviously from my garage to Los Santos Customs and then back again. I thought this is interesting. This has a lot of traction for a muscle car. This could do very well. And then I actually got it on the track and realized that it just had no engine power whatsoever, no acceleration. The top speed is absolutely dreadful for the muscle cars class, and it just seems like such a wasted opportunity. If you'd given the Nightshade even a top speed of, say, something like the Blade, like 112 miles per hour rather than the 104 that it has, it's still nowhere near the top speed of the Dominator, which was 120, but you give it something reasonable to work with, the Nightshade would definitely have been a car that could be used in a race. And the muscle cars class in general is very well balanced at the top. Now, you know, not every car has to be a very quick car, not every car has to be on the pace, and I can certainly understand that. but it just seems like a bit of a missed opportunity because the Nightshade, it's a very nice car. It looks quite cool. It's a very different car to drive in terms of the way that it drives around the corners. It just seems a bit of a shame that it couldn't be a little bit more competitive than what it is. But it's, you know, it's a nice addition. But I feel like it will be quickly forgot about. Now, the Verlierer, and again, that's just the way that I'm going to call it because I just cannot get this name down properly. Thank you for all the suggestions. I've tried, but I'm just going to leave it like that. The Verlierer, the problem with it is that it doesn't have much traction. It actually has less traction than a Fusillade, just to put it into perspective. So it does have a very high top speed, as we saw, like the Massacro. It's got exactly the same top speed as a Massacro, and it would have been equaling the Massacros at the very top of the sports class in terms of top speed had it not been for the Shafters. But the problem with it is that it just doesn't have the traction. It's got the same top speed as a Massacro, but it's got a hell of a lot less traction than a Massacro. So, and obviously by extension, a Massacro has a hell of a lot less traction than a lot of other top sports cars as well. So it's done very well to get the position that it gets. You know, a 106 is a very respectable lap time. And again, on certain tracks that have a lot of long straights and not very many high speed corners, more sort of slow speed corners where the acceleration can be used and the traction isn't really used as much, then the Verlierer will be a reasonable car to use, and it's certainly going to be competitive because even now people in my crew use all sorts of sports cars. They don't just stick to the Elegy and the Feltzer. They're using all kinds of sports cars, Serranos, Comets, Carbonizers, all sorts of things, Banshees, and the Verlierer fits in with that sort of group very, very nicely. And it's a beautiful, beautiful car. I think I might keep this car just because it's just incredible. I like all of the modifications that you can have on it. There's some really great modifications, sporty style modifications. Some of these modifications are the sort of thing that I would have liked to see on the V12 version of the Schafter. But it looks fantastic. It's a beautiful car to look at. And although that it's not necessarily on the pace of the top sports cars, it is reasonably competitive. And we have to remember that the last time we had a competitive sports car was pretty much this time last year with the festive update that released the Massacro race car and the Jester race car. Obviously we had our last sports car in general was actually the Heists update with the Kuruma, but it wasn't necessarily on the pace of the top sports cars in general. So it's been a long time since we've had a sports car that is even anywhere near on the pace, and we've kind of gotten the three in one go with the two Shafters and the Verlierer as well. So yeah, again, it seems to have been overshadowed a little bit by the Shafters, but it's a very, very nice car in general. Now, finally, we come on to the Mamba. The reason that I've left this until last is because it pretty much shows how easily it could be to fix a class. Now, I talked about this at the start, and I'll probably leave a lot of the sort of notes that I've got on this for the reclassification video, but basically, it shows that if that sports classics class was in any way balanced, the Mamba would be a reasonable car to use. I love the Mamba. You know, a Cobra is something that I've always wanted in the game, and I'm probably going to keep this as well. Although it's a bit rough over the bumps, I love the way it drives. It has a really good engine. It feels quite powerful, although it doesn't have the traction. And obviously, as we've seen from the top speed, it's not on the pace of the top sports classics cars anyway. But it's got great acceleration. It's a tiny little thing as well. I'd like to see it in a side-by-side with the Z-Type just for kind of a size comparison, but it really does pack a punch. Now, the problem with it isn't necessarily the Mamba itself, it's the Sterling GT. The Sterling GT ruins the Sports Classics class because of its spoiler. Because, again, they probably gave this to finalise to some intern or some apprentice, and he thought it might be a good idea to make the rear tyre on the Sterling GT add traction, you know. And the problem is that without that spoiler without that rear tyre on the Sterling GT acting like a spoiler and adding traction, the Sterling GT would be incredibly well balanced for the Sports Classics class. It would be only a second per lap quicker than the Z-Type. I think maybe even less than a second quicker than the Z-Type, but because of its horrendous top speed, it would be extremely well balanced with the Z-Type and with all of the other Sports Classics cars by extension. And as we saw from the Sports Classics Showdown video that I posted and the event that I hosted, when in that event we used the Sterling GT, but the rear tyre, the spoiler, wasn't allowed to be used, and it was a very, very good race, very well balanced between the top 6 Sports Classics, and the Mamba would have become basically the top 7 there. So yeah, all it takes is to remove the spoiler on the Sterling GT and the Sports Classics class becomes incredibly well balanced, sort of on the same level as how balanced the Muscle Cars class is. And it's just a shame, it's just such a shame. I would say that the Mamba and basically the Monroe could also do with a spoiler. That would really make it even more balanced, but ultimately it's the Sterling GT that ruins the Sports Classics class, not the Mamba not being on the pace. The Mamba is very much on the pace if the Sterling GT didn't have that spoiler. And again, I think it's just another one of those miscommunications and mistakes from Rockstar, because as I've mentioned, the Sterling GT without that spoiler is perfectly balanced in the Sports Classics class, and I would imagine that the people who are programming these cars know that. You know, they do all the work, they know that the Sterling GT has a terrible top speed, so they decide to make it a little bit quicker around a track, so that on a track like Cunning Coroners it's a second quicker, but it's got a horrendous top speed, so it's going to, you know, balance out in terms of the track selection. They do all that work, they program it so it's absolutely perfectly well balanced without the spoiler, and then someone comes in, makes a stupid decision to make that rear tyre add traction, and it becomes 4 seconds a lap quicker on a regular circuit and absolutely dominates and ruins the Sports Classics class. So again, just a bit of frustration there with the Mamba, that the Mamba is a great car and it would have been well on the pace like all of the other Sports Classics cars, but it was more the fact that the Sterling GT has continually ruined it rather than the Mamba being bad. So for the 3 new cars, apart from the Nightshade being a little bit of a disappointment in terms of its pace, I think the 3 brand new cars that we've seen are great, and I've really enjoyed, you know, testing those brand new cars and having something completely fresh. Again, just a bit of a shame that we've sort of got 3 cars that have 4 different variations. That really increased the amount of time I had to spend testing all of these cars. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this analysis, part 1 of the analysis of the cars. I'm always interested to hear what you guys have to say about these cars. Obviously, I've been talking for a long time. I'm not quite sure how long it is, but as always with these videos, I do ramble on quite a lot to basically get a full explanation out there of my thoughts and my own personal feelings, because I can never do it in those testing videos. Those testing videos take so much time and effort. I think I mentioned it in a comment that original testing video for the circuit testing, it took me about 13 hours of constant non-stop work to get that out on the day that the DLC came out, and the response and the support that you guys showed for me for that was absolutely fantastic. So I really do appreciate that, and for those of you who watch these analysis videos and actually get to the end of it, I really do appreciate that as well. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope it's given plenty to think about. Again, keep an eye out for that reclassification video in a few weeks, because I am going to go really hard with all of the support stuff, and I will be needing your guys' support for that. So let me know all your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for watching, I really do appreciate it. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.